Hello and welcome to The Craft&Calling. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I am thrilled for today's conversation. We are talking about how to move from the hustle, the head down type of approach that so many of us exist in our businesses, where frankly, life is passing us by while we're on the job site, while we're behind our computer, while we're working and engaging with men on the field. And our kids are growing up, and relationships are literally slipping through our fingers as a result of not having the proper systems in place. And what Mike Abramowitz is here to talk about is the 257 companies that he has impacted through this very process that he's going to introduce to us, the 60,000 plus hours that he has allowed for and really cultivated freedom for so many business owners in the trades like you and beyond. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us here today. What we're going to talk about is so important, and I'm grateful to have you with us.
Well, I'm grateful to be here. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Mike, you have a really powerful why when it comes to your story and what has positioned you to be able to help people in the blue collar field. I love the way that you talk about it. You say blue collar hustle with white collar systems, because there is so often this dissonance of, the white collar is more so wearing the nice pretty suits and working behind the computer, and then the blue collar is they actually have the grit and the wherewithal to get shit done. And that's actually what you say. You say you help people become free. What has transpired leading you up till now, especially in relationship to your dad? Your dad's been in the trades for 45 plus years. So I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for giving me the chance to just share the story. And we could go in any direction, but I'll just share the origin. Dad, he's 84, started a plumbing company. I'm 40. And the same way he operates his plumbing company today at 84, he still works 6 days a week. He still answers every phone call.
Wow.
He still goes through different workers through the different seasons. And he goes to the gym, he goes dancing 3 nights a week, goes to the gym 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, he's super active and healthy, and I love him for that. He's ambitious, he's hardworking, he's fun loving, he's super generous. I learned how to give and how to help other people through a lot of his acts of service. So a lot of great attributes. Just growing up, I wish that he attended more of like my National Honor Society or basketball games or any of those types of things. So um,
Mm.
growing up in New Jersey, youngest of 8, and I was sharing with you in the green room that I'm now the youngest of 9 because a couple of years ago, big brother, new brother Chuck went to ancestry.com and realized that we're siblings. So my dad had an oopsie when he was like 17 or 18 years old. So youngest of 9, and there's a large gap between my siblings and myself. So I grew up like a big mama's boy.
Mm.
Like my dad told me when I was 18, I was getting ready to go to college, and he's like, you'll be back in like 2 weeks. You're not going to be able to last on your own type of like challenge, I guess. The good fatherly challenge there. But I shared with you or before we click record that mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 16. She passed away when I was 20. And that was a really tough season for me because I was studying engineering in college. And I had this like pressure from like dad's voice in my head, like, don't fail, essentially. So it
Yeah.
was just like, I just knew how to work. I had work ethic, I had grit, and that's all I was going to do. So I paid my way through college selling Cutco kitchen knives. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 20, and I bought my first house when I was 20, and second house was
Mm.
21. Mom's life insurance. I had 3 rental properties before I graduated college, and then with my engineering degree, I decided to open up a career office with Cutco. And then I trained about 5,000 other students to do what I did as a college kid, which
Mm.
is how to learn leadership, selling, and all of that. We did about $20 million in that business. I retired from that business after about 20 years of doing that. But the part of the story that I think is relevant is that during my 20s, there was a lot of valleys. That real estate, the market collapsed in 2008. I was negative $130,000 in debt. I had a
Wow.
400 credit score. I mean, all I did was grind. I grinded. I ran every single seat in my business. I was administrative. I was sales. I was hiring. I was payroll. Every single seat everything was relying on me. So like, there's no time for a relationship. There's no time for health. There was no time for
Right.
fun. Until I hired a business coach to kind of help me see that there was another way of doing the same thing, because all I knew was how to work hard because that's what was modeled for me. But he had an experience in India scaling a company from 6 million to 30 million with 1,400 people underneath him. So he showed me how to like corporatize my small business with like systems and automation and hiring
Mm,
offshore assistants. They were like foreign concepts to me. I was just like, I didn't understand any of that, but he showed me how to do it. And I wanted that because I fell in love with my now wife and we got married in 2017. I was like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So that's what happened. So out of the grind and the, I don't know if it's a clean show, but like the shit, essentially, out of the tough, um, came this desire to want to create a predictable business. And
mm,
luckily I did, because in 2020, obviously COVID hit, but our son was born on New Year's Eve of 2020 at 1 pound 4 ounces.
oh
So
my
he was a micro preemie. He was 1 pound 4 ounces, and he was due in April, born on New Year's Eve. And we were in the NICU with him in the ICU for 8.5 months, so for 254 days. And during that
wow.
time, the business that my coach helped me build in those predictability was able to run without me, still do 7 figures in sales without me there. And that's when my wife became a full-time medical mom. I called my business coach and I said, do you think we could partner up and teach other business owners how to create predictability in their business so that way they don't have to wait for a circumstance to happen? And that's the origin of what we're doing at Better Than Rich. So those now over 100,000 hours and over
Mm,
290 businesses that we've been able to support. It's not to like help them prepare for if their kid is in the hospital like me, but it's like if they want to go on a vacation without their cell phone, or if they want to be at family dinner at 6 p.m. and like not have to like be constantly in reaction mode all the time. We want to give these guys like my dad 30 years ago just an opportunity to have options and
mm,
allow business to be a vehicle for their life and not be their life. So that's a
mm,
very long, short version of the story, and we could go in any direction that you see fit.
mm. The last line you said, be the vehicle for their life rather than be their life. Mike, it's really, I just want to honor you for a moment, because so often what is modeled for us is what we automatically do. And it's like you were starting to do that, living in autopilot, modeling your dad. And yet you were able to, thank God, honestly, put in the systems that were necessary for you to, it wasn't, you didn't wait until it was too late. You had everything in place so that when this devastation came, you were able to be with your wife. Because how many times has things like that happen? Life happens, and the husband isn't able to sit with the wife in the grief and in the processing and in the time of, actually you were able to be in the NICU with your son. Imagine if you weren't able to do that. So there's so many elements, and what I want to just draw that distinction and that very stark difference between how your father is currently still living versus how you have chosen to live. And every single person listening has the opportunity to choose. Am I going to be 84 years old looking back without these deep relationships, or am I going to allow for freedom? But there's a cost to both, right? There's a cost to both ways of living. I love that you actually brought some color to your dad, that he's out dancing and he still does have fun, but he's working 6 days a week, and there's actually a dissonance on the relationship side. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I got to give my dad credit because he's way better than his parents were. So
Mm,
my dad is raised in the slums of Trenton, no hot water, bed bugs, roaches, no money. Like his dad was a big gambler and like hitting the bottle, and his mom was kind of like pretty absent. So he was the youngest as well. So his like older sister is like 9 years older than him. He tells a story about like he was freezing and he was sick, and she just like laid coats on them because they had no heat and hot water. And
wow.
he tells me that story because he said he's like he thought he was going to die that night. He was like 4 years old or something, and his parents weren't around. Like so, my dad's upbringing, he really didn't have one. He was like this lone survivor, and so he could only he could only give what he was able to. What's the saying? The saying, yeah, I cannot give to others what I do not have for myself. So he never like knew how to nurture or like be loving and so warm and stuff like that. He just did the best that he possibly could.
Right.
So I want to give, that sentiment there. So, but it took a lot of
Yeah.
time and therapy and journaling and reflection for me to have and find the empathy for his lived experiences, while
Mm,
also simultaneously having the desire and the wants for me to have the dad that I also want in my life, and
yeah.
also encourage and challenge and create the relationship that I want to have with him. So there does take a lot of intentionality there. It's not perfect by any means, but I just wanted to capture that. I went on this little tangent to not to avoid the actual question, but I just want to make sure that there is
Yeah.
color. And the challenges that has with some of the relationships is because of how he was raised. The decisions that he's made has been about survival. So he
Yeah.
made an allegiance to Israel when he was younger, because he was born in the early 40s, 1941. He saw like everything that was happening in the Holocaust. He made an allegiance. He's going to be there for Israel. So he fought in the 6 Day War. He fought in the Yom Kippur War. And when he had my older siblings, he decided I made an allegiance to Israel, and he like left his wife and kids to go to Israel to fight in a war. And then he did the same shit when I was a kid when the Gulf War was taking place with his little kids at home. And like this just gives me a lens of like, again, lone wolf survivor, but a person of his word, to his faith, to purpose, to things that matter most to him. So that doesn't mean relationships didn't matter. It's just he never was taught that really relationships should matter.
Mm,
But now 84, he's trying to do the best he can, right? So, uh,
yes. Yeah.
but I'm doing the best I can at observing that, finding the empathy, finding the compassion to suffer with him through some
Mm,
of those, trying to find as much patience as I can and understanding, while simultaneously like, hey dude, like I want you in my kids' lives. You gotta do some stuff. And I sometimes I find myself reverse coaching him, which I hate, but that's the role I'm in sometimes. All right. I digress a little bit. So let me kick it back to you though.
I love it. I appreciate the color there because frankly, every single one of us has a deep we were talking about the why when we first started. Why in terms of what can motivate us, but then also why in the subconscious because of our lived experience that perhaps we actually haven't worked through. And you mentioned hours of therapy and counseling, which I so respect because now you can actually enter into him and his lived experience. And you said even coaching him, like there is something where sometimes the kids do actually start parenting the parents whether they intend to or not. And isn't that how it's actually supposed to be? I was thinking about the generational kind of legacy of as the adults get older they end up getting where they actually really need support at towards the end of their life, and then the children start parenting the parent. And what a beautiful cycle of life where the parents gave so much to the children. And so there's something I actually think very fitting about that, where we're
I also
actually able to
look
really
off
give.
reparenting little Michael too. So my
Yes.
parts, those childhood parts. So I don't know if you ever have talked about that on the show, but we could always go in that direction too. But there's a lot of that
Yes.
inner work of reparenting the little kid in me too. So anyway, but
Mm.
sorry.
Well, Michael, I actually, let's go in that direction. Let's talk about that, and then I want to come back to systems if that's okay with you. Do you have time for that to stay on
I
that
am
trip?
all yours. I'm here for it.
Love
So
it.
whatever.
I love it. What you just brought up is incredibly important. And one of the things about the craft and calling is that we actually do go into some of these topics because we recognize that in the legacy that we want to leave behind, so much of that is the work that we do today. We're actively creating our legacy now. And it requires work. It requires looking in the mirror so that at the end of our life, we don't look back with regret. And we might have some, but the more intentional we're able to live and the more intentional we are to create the life that we want and the legacy that we want, the better. So, can you talk a little bit about what you were just alluding to?
Sure. And I will lay this frame. The only way I'm able to do the inner work is because I've created the systems in the business to buy back the time. So I have time freedom to do some self inner
Mhm.
reflection. If I was so caught up, when I was so caught up in the business, there was no time for self reflection. There was no time for doing deep deep work and breath work and coaching and all this stuff. It was just like, I got to go make money. I got to go handle my responsibilities, right? Responsibility, ability to respond. And the thing I was responding to was debt, So,
Yes.
um, during those seasons of struggle and suffering, like it was tough to do the introspection work. However, now that I'm in a season where I set up my schedule and I set up my business that has boundaries protecting my priorities, I have every Monday as a personal day. I have every morning, I have every evening, I have Saturdays for my kids, for my wife to take a break, and I have Sundays for the family where we go out together. I have Thursdays as a date with my wife. So like we have a babysitter that comes. So like I set up a schedule where I could be really intentional Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. I can work on my business on Mondays, and I'm able to have the type of results that we want to have. So I think that context is important. I mean, in 2023, I was able to have this schedule working 30 hours a week in the business, space to work on the business, still take 9 full weeks off and set
Mhm.
aside over 6 figures in savings. And this is on a one household income because my wife became a full-time medical mom, and not having my wife have to go back to work in 5 years. So it's like I
Wow.
live, I live the principles that I teach, but I only can do that because I've created the space to make working
Yes.
a priority. So all that, what I was alluding to was the deep work about the wounds that I had as a kid, the dad I wanted, or the mom I wanted, or the siblings I wanted, the mentorship that I wanted that I didn't have. My vice was food. So I was a real chubby kid. I snuck Twinkies into my bedroom. I was the kid who I was like 250 pounds was my highest, I think, going into high school. So like I was a big boy. I was bullied. I had pimples, freckles, braces, glasses. I mean, I had nicknames like Snacks or the Hunchback of Israel. The Hunchback of Israel was a harsh one, right?
Wow.
Abramowitz, right? Like these are just harsh, like bully, like getting in fist fights, like all of this stuff that this poor little kid, um, and then his older siblings are like 9 years older than him and 20 years older than him. That are like tough. Like my three older brothers are bodybuilders, for crying out loud. My dad was a bodybuilder, for crying out loud, right? So it's just like so much that felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a part of the tribe. I wasn't like everyone else in my family. So therefore I was different. So now it's like this 40-year-old man being who I'm becoming, trying to do my best for my 4-year-old and 1-year-old, soon to be 5 and 2, to not project little Michael's insecurities that I had as a kid onto them as I'm parenting them. So how do I do that? I sit with Michael. I do an ice bath each morning, and I ground, and I stand on the earth, and I do a little morning prayer for myself, and I will go to the gym, and I'll do yoga, and I will journal, and I'll reflect, and
Mhm.
I'll give little Michael a voice. I've done exercises like non-dominant hand writing as Michael to my 40-year-old self, and then my dominant hand with my right hand writing a letter back to little Michael as to my 40-year-old self, having a conversation with my 10-year-old self. So it's like, what's the purpose? Is so I don't project my deep childhood wounds onto my kids. So I don't have to raise my kids to survive my childhood. I could raise my kids to survive their own childhood, that they get a chance to experience. So that's a very long, loaded response, and we could go in a lot of different directions there. But I think it's enough for the listener to say, by creating systems and predictability in my business, if I choose to do some of the deep work, I can. But this is some scary shit. I'm not telling you to go do the deep work. I'm not suggesting it because it's a little uncomfortable, very vulnerable and scary. But it's nice to at least have the option to choose to do the deep work if you wanted to. Or you could just do other type of work if you wanted to do that too. I just choose this because I do want to. I do want to have deep relationships with my kids, but also with other people in my life. And the more I can understand myself, the better I'll be able to relate with others.
Mm, that's so good. One of our core pillars for the craft and calling is connection, and that growth is relational. However, it starts with us doing the work and going inward first, so that we're not, you said the word projecting. I'm so grateful for this example and this story that you gave about not teaching our children to survive our childhood, but being able to really handle ourselves, do the work, and be emotionally mature. We talk about the cultivation of intellectual intelligence, which lends to systems and cultivating the things in our business that allow for us to be able to do this work, to then cultivate emotional intelligence, even physical intelligence. You were talking about struggles with weight. How much is our physical well-being a reflection of our emotional health? And that will always impact those around us, whether it's on the business or at home. And so, really, what you're talking about is actually a very core part of the ethos of what it is to be a full fledged successful human, because it's not just about having a successful business. We want to be ourselves successful in the legacy we're leaving behind. So, Mike, with that, can we talk a little bit more about, if, let's say, somebody does want to start, let's say they've never even thought about cultivating emotional intelligence, like what where do they start? What thickens should they do?
Yeah. If you want to do the very simplest thing is just write these questions down and just answer them because that's what journaling is for me. The
Mm,
first question is, how do I feel?
mm,
Simple. Grab a pen, write the question, how do I feel? And just let the pen write itself. I feel excited. I feel nervous. I feel angst. I feel sad. I feel worried. I feel happy. And then it's like the next question is, why do I feel these emotions?
mm.
And then let the pen write itself. I feel happy because I was able to take my kid to school this morning. I feel sad because my wife is overwhelmed with this thing that she's working on. I feel overwhelmed because all these jobs and all these things, and my team is worried about me. I feel overwhelmed because so and so just quit. I feel
Yeah.
frustrated because no one's following this and this. Great. So now we acknowledge I feel this and why I'm feeling this. If we just did those two things, we're ahead of the curve because now we're at least acknowledging the feelings that we often suppress. So if we just do those two, that's great. If you want to be an overachiever, the next two questions are really great. The next two question is, how do I want to feel?
Yes.
And if we answer that, now we're creating a reframe. So it's like, how do I want to feel? I want to feel empowered. I want to feel certain. I want to feel this. Then it's the fourth question is, what are the actions I can take to feel that? And now we
Mm,
put emotions into action. So I feel what I was feeling. I understand. I acknowledge why I was feeling that. I reframe it to how I want to feel. And then it's, these are the actions. Let me go execute and just move forward with a new set of intentions without letting the jaded emotions that were lingering in my unconscious nervous system take control. So very basic. I do that check-in very frequently. And I think it's a really simple way for someone to get into the emotional intelligence space. Where I started I don't know, 15 years ago at this point. I mean, I'm a 7-time firewalker with Tony Robbins and traveled the country. I have 9 books and I spent like so much time and money and dollars and resources and energy in the emotional intelligence, personal growth, self-awareness space. But
mm.
that is like such a great starting place for someone.
Such a good starting place. I'd love for us to, and we're going to get to systems, I promise. I'd love for us to, before we do, I think this might be the last question before we get there. You mentioned nervous system, and you talked about your dad living in survival. When we're making decisions out of a survival place, we're never able to get to the place of really abundance because we're trapped in our nervous system is literally trapping us mentally, our ability to even vision bigger. Can you talk a little bit about that and the part that the physical nervous system plays in relation to visioning the life that you want?
Yeah. I, oh boy, how much time we got? No, I'm just kidding. Here's what happens. The moment we just try to there's sympathetic nervous system and there's the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic, without getting like so woo woo out there, it's just like rest, digest, breathe. These are the things that are happening to rejuvenate the body. And then the sympathetic nervous system is just like everything is like achieving outside world. So think about like outside of me and then inside of me.
Mm,
So the body and the mind, there's this connection between the two where the mind can think about stressful things and the body will feel stressed even
mm,
if there's no stress happening in my life, because the mind is creating a sympathetic action type of feeling and my body is responding to these thoughts as if it was happening. So the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system are connected in that way, all through thoughts. So what we try to do is just acknowledge what those thoughts are, so the body can actually try to rest. And that is hard to do, especially when we're constantly in reaction mode and we're in distraction mode. Distraction and reaction are the like catalysts for stress. So what I just intentionally encourage people to do, and what I do for myself, is to not settle into the distraction and the reaction as much as I possibly can, to just be. And how to just be is a lot easier said than done, but it's like the doom scrolling on social, or the comparison on other on things, or the reaction of text messages or emails or calls and all of those things. That's why I'll give you a framework that works for business called the time rich six that I'll talk about. But like, knowing that that exists, this firefighter, flight or fight, responding, reacting is
Mhm.
happening, and we can mitigate that as long as we're aware that that is happening by shutting down the devices, removing the distraction reaction, sitting, being, and I'm going to use a very harsh word that most people listening to this podcast absolutely hate, and I'm going to say it, being bored.
Mm,
Most of us hate
interesting.
being bored. So what we do is we try to find reaction and distraction to avoid the feeling of boredom. However, on the other end of boredom is where creativity exists. So if we just can settle into positive boredom and sitting with